The Moon and Sixpence. Have you ever had a dream that was so strong that you wanted to give up everything to follow it? Many years ago, in London, there lived a man named Charles Strickland. He was a quiet and ordinary person. He worked as a successful stockbroker, had a wife, 2 children, and a comfortable home. To most people, he seemed to have everything needed for a happy life. However, inside his heart, there was a hidden desire that nobody knew. Strickland was not interested in money, social success, or a comfortable family life. He was not a charming man, and he was not good at expressing his feelings. He spent most of his time quietly working. His wife believed he was a normal husband who cared about his career and family. But one day, something unexpected happened. Strickland suddenly left his family and went to Paris. Everyone was shocked. His friends could not understand why he would leave such a comfortable life. His wife was deeply hurt and angry. She believed that another woman must be the reason for his leaving. People thought Strickland had lost his mind. The narrator of the story, a young writer, heard about this strange event. He was curious about Strickland's decision. Later, Strickland's wife asked him to go to Paris and persuade her husband to come back. When the narrator arrived in Paris, he found Strickland living in a small, poor room. The place was completely different from his former comfortable home in London. Strickland had almost no money. He had no good clothes, no successful job, and no interest in returning to his old life. The narrator tried to understand him. "Why did you leave your family?" he asked. Strickland answered calmly that he wanted to become a painter. The narrator was surprised. Painting? Strickland was already a middle-aged man. He had no training as an artist. He had no reputation, no money, and no future promise. Most people would think it was impossible for him to start a new life as a painter. The narrator asked him if he missed his family. Strickland showed little emotion. He said that he did not want to return. He had spent many years living a life that did not belong to him. Now he wanted to do what he truly wanted. The narrator realized that Strickland was not running away from his family because of another woman. He was running away from his old life. After this meeting, Strickland continued living in Paris. He spent his days painting and learning by himself. He did not care about other people's opinions. He lived a poor and difficult life, but he felt free. At the same time, his family suffered greatly. His wife returned to London and told everyone that her husband had abandoned them. Many people felt sorry for her. However, Strickland did not change his decision. Years passed, and the narrator heard that Strickland was still painting in Paris. His life was still difficult. He often had no money for food and lived in terrible conditions. During this time, he met another painter named Dirk Struve. Dirk was a kind but not very talented artist. He admired Strickland's work and believed that Strickland had great artistic ability, even though most people did not understand him. Dirk tried to help Strickland many times. He gave him food, money, and a place to stay. However, Strickland did not show much gratitude. He was a cold and selfish man. He only cared about his painting. Dirk had a beautiful wife named Blanche. She was quiet, proud, and unhappy in her marriage. Dirk loved her deeply, but Blanche did not love him in the same way. When Strickland stayed at Dirk's home, something changed. Strickland became interested in Blanche. He did not think about Dirk's feelings or the kindness Dirk had shown him. He only followed his own desire. Blanche eventually left Dirk and went with Strickland. Dirk was heartbroken. He could not understand why Strickland treated people so cruelly. He had helped Strickland when nobody else would, but Strickland still hurt him. The narrator also found Strickland's behavior difficult to accept. He saw that Strickland had a powerful artistic spirit, but he also saw that Strickland could ignore the feelings of others. Strickland and Blanche moved to another place. However, their relationship was not happy. Blanche soon discovered that Strickland was not a romantic man. He did not care about love, comfort, or happiness. His only true passion was painting. For Strickland, people were less important than his art. Blanche became lonely and unhappy. She wanted love and attention, but Strickland could not give her what she needed. After the difficult relationship with Blanche, Strickland's life became even more separated from ordinary society. He cared less and less about money, reputation, and other people's opinions. The only thing that mattered to him was painting. The narrator continued to hear stories about Strickland. Some people said he was a terrible man. Others said he was a genius. Everyone had a different opinion about him. But one thing was certain. Strickland was completely controlled by his desire to create art. After some years in Paris, Strickland decided to leave Europe. He wanted to find a place where he could live freely and paint without being disturbed. He traveled to Tahiti, a beautiful island in the Pacific Ocean. At that time, Tahiti was far away from the modern world. It was a place of nature, simple life, and peaceful surroundings. For Strickland, it was the perfect place to escape from society. When he arrived in Tahiti, he had almost nothing. He had no money, no friends, and no plan for the future. But he did not worry. He felt that he had finally found the place he had been searching for. In Tahiti, Strickland lived a very simple life. He spent most of his time painting. He walked through forests, watched the ocean, and studied the people and nature around him. The beauty of the island deeply influenced his art. The colors of the sky, the trees, the flowers, and the people became part of his paintings. His work became more powerful and more unique. However, life in Tahiti was not easy. Strickland had little money, and he often became sick because of his poor living conditions. Many people thought he would not survive, but Strickland did not care. He was not interested in living a long and comfortable life. He only wanted to finish the paintings in his mind. During this time, he met a man named Captain Nichols and his wife, Atta. Atta was a native woman from Tahiti. She was simple, calm, and strong. Unlike many people Strickland had met before, she did not judge him. She accepted him as he was. Strickland and Atta eventually lived together. They built a small home away from the busy world. For the first time in many years, Strickland had a quiet place where he could paint without interruption. Atta cared for him. She cooked for him, looked after him when he was sick, and accepted his strange personality. Their relationship was very different from his past relationships. Strickland did not become a warm or loving person. He was still distant and often difficult to understand, but Atta did not expect him to change. She understood that Strickland belonged to his art. In Tahiti, Strickland created some of his greatest works. However, the outside world still did not know his talent. Back in Europe, most people had forgotten him. He was just a strange man who had abandoned his family and disappeared. Only a few people believed that he was a great artist. The narrator eventually traveled to Tahiti because he wanted to learn more about Strickland. He wanted to understand the man behind the rumors. When he arrived, he discovered a very different Strickland. He saw a man who was completely focused on his painting. Strickland seemed to have found his true place in the world. The narrator visited Strickland's home and saw his paintings. He was deeply surprised. The paintings were unlike anything he had seen before. They were full of powerful emotions and a strange beauty. They showed nature and human beings in a way that felt mysterious and original. The narrator began to understand why Strickland had sacrificed everything for his art. Although Strickland was selfish and often cruel, he had a rare gift. He was able to see something that ordinary people could not see. However, Strickland's life was not without suffering. After living in Tahiti for some time, he became seriously ill. His health became worse, but he continued painting. Even when his body was weak, his mind was still full of ideas. During his illness, Strickland created a great painting on the walls of his house. He worked with all his energy. He painted the world he saw inside his heart. The people around him did not fully understand what he was creating, but Atta knew that the painting was something special. She stayed beside him and took care of him. Later, Strickland became blind because of his illness. This was a terrible situation for an artist. Painting was the center of his life, but now he could no longer see. Yet he continued to live with the same determination. He could not paint anymore, but the images inside his mind remained alive. As Strickland became older and weaker, he spent almost all of his time inside his small house in Tahiti. His body was becoming tired, but his mind was still filled with the world of art. Even though he was blind, he continued to think about painting. The pictures in his imagination were still clear. The colors, shapes, and scenes that he had created in his mind remained with him. The people around him knew that he was very different from ordinary people. Strickland had never cared about fame, money, or respect. He had left behind a comfortable life in London, lost his family, hurt many people, and lived in poverty. To many people, his choices were impossible to understand. But for Strickland, there was only one thing that mattered. He wanted to follow his own truth. Before his death, Strickland created one final great work. It was painted on the walls of his house in Tahiti. The painting was huge and powerful. It showed the beauty and mystery of life that he had discovered on the island. The work was unlike anything people had seen before. However, Strickland never knew how the world would react to it. He never waited for praise. He never cared whether people would call him a genius or a madman. For him, the painting itself was enough. After Strickland died, Atta followed his final wish. Before his death, Strickland had asked that the painting should not be saved or shown to others. He wanted his work to disappear with him. Atta respected his wish. The walls of the house were destroyed, and the great painting disappeared forever. Many years later, people began to understand Strickland's talent. His paintings became famous. Art critics started to study his work. They realized that he had created something unique and powerful. People who once ignored him began to admire him. The world finally recognized the artist that had been hidden behind his strange personality. But Strickland himself never knew about this success. He never received fame. He never received wealth. He never returned to the comfortable life that he once had. He only followed the dream that lived inside his heart. The narrator often thought about Strickland's life. He wondered what kind of person Strickland really was. Was he a selfish and cruel man? Or was he a great artist who had no choice but to follow his passion? The answer was not simple. Strickland was not a kind person. He often ignored the feelings of others. He hurt people who loved him and refused to take responsibility for his actions. But at the same time, he had an extraordinary artistic power. He had the courage to leave everything behind and search for something that was more important to him than comfort and success. The title of the story, The Moon and Sixpence, represents two different worlds. The sixpence is a small coin on the ground. It represents ordinary life, money, safety, and the things people can easily see. The moon is far away in the sky. It represents dreams, beauty, and something difficult to reach. Most people spend their lives looking at the sixpence because it is practical and real. But Strickland looked at the moon. He gave up everything familiar and followed a dream that few people could understand. His journey was painful and lonely, but it allowed him to create something unforgettable. His life reminds people that every person has different dreams and different paths. Some people choose a safe and comfortable road. Others choose a difficult road because they are searching for something deeper. Strickland chose the second path. And although his life was full of mistakes and pain, his art became his lasting mark on the world. Thank you for watching.